We are live.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the October 21st, 2020 meeting of the East Hampton Town Planning Board. This meeting is being conducted via Zoom. Thank you to the folks at LTV for getting us on air. Thank you for our planning board, planning department, I should say, staff, and the planning board staff for all the work to get us here. This meeting tonight we have one item on the agenda, but it's not going to be important. The agenda item is the Wainscot Commercial Center. What we have tonight is the environmental impact statement, draft environmental impact statement, and our determination that it is complete, that we deem it ready. We are going to hear from first Eric Shantz from the planning department, and then we'll hear from two experts that have been hired on behalf of the town to deal with traffic and water issues. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to present whomever they deem it necessary or desirable to have speak on their behalf. And then after that, the planning board will be heard from. Now, Randy Parsons is, we call him the committee. Whoever is from the planning board is responsible for review of this application. So once we hear from the planning department, and then we hear from the applicant, we'll hear from Randy, and then we'll hear from the rest of the planning board. Anyone who is interested in knowing, the experts that we've hired have been paid for by the applicant. It's part of the process. The applicant has had the report, I understand, that was made available to them just when it was made available to us. I should say that's the report by the planning department on the environmental impact statement. I should say that the environmental impact statement is a rather substantial document, almost 1,000 pages in length. I'll say in my own experience, it's the biggest EIS I've ever seen. But then again, this is an enormous project.
I don't think you're right.
It's the largest project that we've seen in the time that I've been on the planning board, chairman of the board. And it deserves the attention that we're going to give it by giving us an entire evening tonight with no other matters. By the way, if anyone wishes to see the report from the planning department, it's available at the town website. Go to the town clerk's office, and I think the link is agendas and meetings. Scroll down to the planning board. So again, please remember that we're going to hear from the planning department. We're going to hear from our experts. Then we'll turn the floor over to the applicant. So with that, Eric, the floor is yours.
Sam,
Okay.
let's make sure.
I'm sorry.
Let's make sure that Mr. Egan is here. I don't see him on the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do.
I'm here.
I see Erin Tintle is
Here.
Mr. Egan, you're there? That's what you are? It's muted. Yeah, no, it's not muted.
We got it. We're unmuted now.
Mr. Egan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And you got the package when it went out, right? The report, correct?
Yes, we got the report and we got a revised report 2 days ago. Yes.
Very good. Okay, good. Then we're all on the same.
Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Okay, and just so everybody understands, one last thing I did mean to say. The environmental impact statement is it was a product of the applicant that was produced in line with our scoping, which we did back in January of 2019. And we got the application, we got the EIS, the environmental impact statement, in July. And we've had our planning department and the experts go over it. And we are now here today to give it our attention. So with that, Eric?
Sure. As the chairman noted, this is a review of the draft environmental impact statement. Let me just share screen here. So the traffic impact study and hydrology, soil and groundwater information are being reviewed by consultants from the firms LK McLean and Associates PC and FPM Group respectively. Their comments were submitted separately and they are present here to speak to them. So we broke down our memo by the sections of the DEIS. The first part, the description of the proposed project and the benefits of the proposed project and need. The document references the study of parcels zoned commercial industrial within the town of East Hampton. It is stated that based on this analysis, it is apparent that few undeveloped CI zone parcels remain in the town for future small commercial service, wholesale and warehouse businesses. Subdivision of the property into 50 CI lots would accommodate the current and future needs of the town by creating small undeveloped CI zone parcels for existing and additional service, commercial, wholesale, and warehouse businesses. The DEIS does not establish a need for 50 commercial lots proposed by the a need for the 50 commercial lots proposed by the applicants. Unless and until that need exists, the claimed potential benefit of the project will remain hypothetical and the lands involved will remain underdeveloped. While it is noted that the study states that there are 29 vacant CI zone parcels remaining in the town, the planning department questions that this definitively proves that the subdivision of the property would accommodate the current and future needs of the town. No economic analysis providing the need for an additional 50 lots as designed in the proposed subdivision has been referenced or provided. The town's Hamlet business district plan makes mention of the importance of the construction trades to the economy, but makes no such claims that additional lots or CI zoning are required, let alone provide a figure of 50. The DEIS does not provide a separate economic analysis. This information should be required if the DEIS is going to determine that an additional 50 lots are needed. The study assumes the future development potential of CI zone lots and the allowable uses and intensity of uses therein is limited to development of vacant lots. This would appear to be an inaccurate method of determining the existing development potential for commercial industrial uses. For example, the sandpit property, the other sandpit off of Springs Fireplace Road, is not counted as potential future development. More than 70 acres of this property is zoned CI, and although it is technically developed, it is not so to within a fraction of what would otherwise be allowed under current zoning. The redevelopment potential of this property, as well as those which could also be subdivided, should be provided. The aforementioned statement addresses the current and future needs of the town by creating small undeveloped CI zone parcels for existing and additional service, commercial, wholesale, and warehouse business uses. We note, though, that service commercial is also allowed in the NB, CB, and CS zoning districts. Wholesale businesses are allowable also in NB, CB, and waterfront zoning districts, and warehouses are also allowable in the CS zoning district. Therefore, future development of properties for these uses is not restricted to vacant CI lots. The DEIS should account for the full development potential for these uses throughout the town if this is to be identified as a reason that the proposed 50-lot subdivision is necessary to fulfill a community need. Bottom line, our recommendation, the applicant should be asked to provide an economic analysis of the need for commercial sites in the town that takes into account the availability of not only CI zone properties, but also of other commercially zoned properties in the town where similar uses may be developed. This analysis should additionally compare the need for more commercial sites against the need for other types of development, mixed use, multifamily, single family, contemplated by the Hamlet plan for the properties involved in the project. Part 2 is natural environmental resources, and we focus on potential impacts, topography. On pages 23 and 24, the potential impacts of various issues, including stormwater runoff, as a result of final grades are addressed. It is stated both that the individual site development concept is to have 6,000 square feet or larger surface bioretention areas for stormwater treatment and open space to the rear of each individual site, and that a final grading and drainage plan and erosion sediment control plans will be prepared as site of the site plan application process. Just want to find another visual for you here. These statements imply that the issues will be addressed. The issues will be addressed as part of the individual site plan applications for each lot, as opposed to in a comprehensive manner for the subdivision as a whole. The town code requires that adequate drainage facilities are required subdivision improvements. Calculations and provisions for recharge basins or other such areas for stormwater retention must be provided at this time. As noted above, a final grading plan has not been provided. This information is required at this time in order to determine the potential impacts of the proposed subdivision. Pursuant to the town code, a minimum finished grade of 10 feet above mean sea level shall be required in all locations within a subdivision. The plan will also need to demonstrate that the required minimum 2-foot vertical separation of groundwater for sanitary system leaching pools can be obtained on each lot. The grading plan should include calculations regarding the amount of fill, its composition and source location are required to be brought to the site, and an analysis of the type and number of trucks, including trips, are required. Additionally, a landscaping plan should be provided to demonstrate that the site will be replanted in a suitable manner, and that is a requirement of the town code. We quoted it in the memo. In the section on water resources, existing conditions, we just note that there is a wetland that is located on a property in the southeastern portion, well, on a lot abutting the southeastern portion of the site. I will try to zoom in here. And you can see on my cursor here, it's this particular lot here. So potential impacts, surface water and drainage. The DEIS inadequately assesses the potential post-construction impacts of stormwater discharge from the project and provides insufficient details regarding proposed measures to mitigate against those impacts. The DES discusses in some details the measures that the applicants will employ during construction to address stormwater discharges. However, an analysis of the potential post-construction stormwater discharge is not provided in the DEIS or any of the reports provided by the applicant. The document defers specific measures for management and treatment of stormwater discharges for future development to a site-by-site future analysis. This approach does not provide the planning board the basic information it needs in order to fulfill its secret responsibilities. A detailed analysis of the reasonably estimated quality and quantity of post-construction stormwater discharge, along with an evaluation of management and treatment measures to ensure the discharges of stormwater into groundwater and receiving surface waters, particularly into Georgica Pond, will meet applicable water quality standards and not degrade that resource. This is necessary in order for the planning board to assess the significance of stormwater discharge impacts on the environment from the project. As further support for this information needed, DEC general permit requirements include providing engineering plans for stormwater for an industrial subdivision. The general permit requirements do not allow for an applicant to design a stormwater control system that just addresses infrastructure. The applicant must also design control features for construction and post-construction for any part of the development that is part of the common plan of development. This includes the lots within the subdivision. Accordingly, for purposes of the planning board's secret review, additional information about post-construction stormwater discharges and their management and treatment is required. So in conclusion, our recommendation, conclusion of that point, our recommendation, the applicant should be asked to provide an analysis of the potential quality and quantity of post-construction stormwater discharges associated with the project, along with detailed evaluation of management and treatment measures to ensure that discharges of stormwater into groundwater and receiving waters, particularly into Georgica Pond, will comply with applicable water quality standards and not contribute to degradation of that resource. Human environmental resources, this section of the DEIS, in particular land use, zoning, and plans, potential impacts. The DEIS does not consider the potential impacts of a reasonable range of allowable uses under existing zoning for the project. Instead, the applicant states, quote, actual uses to occupy the site will be based on demand and market conditions. The mixture of potential uses for the proposed lots may have widely varying impacts allowed by existing zoning. Taking this into account, the DEIS should provide a rationale for and consider a reasonable range of potential uses based on existing zoning. Analysis of the potential environmental impacts should be based on that mixture of potential uses through the full build-out of the project. The identification of a reasonable mixture of potential uses should follow in part from the analysis of the need for more commercial lots in the town as discussed previously. The DEIS does provide as a mitigation measure to prohibit certain uses from the project. These would be prohibited through a covenant. These include air terminal, animal husbandry, boatyard, filling station, riding academy, dry cleaning, exterminator, fish processing facility, recycling or scrapyard, and sand mining and excavation. No explanation is given as to why these particular uses were chosen other than to identify them as, quote, intensive uses. The prohibition of these uses is identified as a mitigation measure from potential adverse impacts associated with the land use of the property. As part of its analysis of the potential uses for the project, the applicant should identify what impacts the prohibition of these uses is mitigating. For example, parking, sanitary flow, water uses, hazardous chemicals, and should compare those characteristics to other allowable uses in the CI zoning district so as to determine the impact of this proposed mitigation. It should also be explained why these specific uses were chosen and others such as major car wash, exercise studio, repair garage, for examples, which could potentially generate high water usage, traffic, and or hazardous chemicals were not included. If the applicant intends that such uses may be part of the project, then they and their potential impacts should be considered as part of the mixture of uses evaluated by the DEIS. Further in this section, the DEIS estimates the likely building and total lot coverage on the proposed lots. The building coverage that would result on the majority of the lots is estimated to be 18.75%. Although it is unlikely that a site plan would allow for a maximum allowable building coverage in the CI zone, which is 50%, that's the maximum building coverage allowed. It's unlikely that would happen. However, it is noted that site plans have recently been approved for sites with over 40% building coverage. Unless the applicant is proposing to restrict building and lot coverage to a certain percentage as a mitigation measure, the estimated building and total lot coverage should reflect the mixture of potential uses in order to determine the potential impacts of the proposed subdivision. Our recommendation is that the applicant should be asked to identify and provide a rationale for a reasonable range of potential uses for the full build out of the project and more explanation for why certain uses are proposed to be prohibited while others are not. The analysis of the project's potential environmental impacts in the DEIS should be based on the mixture of uses and should include consideration of the reasonably estimated building and lot coverages associated with those uses. Potential impacts on water supply. The DEIS states the Water Authority was contacted, and it states, additionally, Suffolk County Water Authority indicated that a build out of the site will occur over a number of years and possibly decades, and therefore it is difficult to analyze prospective issues as they relate to water supply. However, the Water Authority letter referenced, which is on the record, states, as you indicated in your letter, build out of the site will occur over a number of years and possibly decades. Therefore, peak water demand on a yearly basis cannot be estimated at this time. The Water Authority's letter seems to indicate that a peak estimate cannot be provided as the applicants have not provided an estimation of the number and types of uses that would be anticipated as part of a comprehensive review of the subdivision or another such comprehensive estimation of anticipated water usage. The Water Authority as an involved agency should be provided additional information, and the estimated peak water usage for the entire subdivision upon complete build out should be provided in order to determine if there would be any adverse impacts upon water supply in the area. It should also be noted that in the DEIS, estimated potable water demand is 16,000 plus gallons per day. Our recommendation as part of the analysis of the potential environmental impacts from a reasonable range of potential uses associated with the project's full build out, the applicant should be asked to obtain confirmation from the Suffolk County Water Authority that sufficient capacity will exist or is anticipated to be available to serve the project's water supply needs based on that mixture of uses and their estimated water demands. Potential impacts regarding wastewater treatment and disposal. As noted in the DEIS in various sections, The subject is within the watershed of Georgia Pond, which is an impaired water body. This is largely the result of excessive nitrogen causing algal and bacterial blooms. The DEIS states that the exact sanitary waste generation cannot be determined at this time. It is stated, unquote, it is stated that the potential sanitary waste to be generated at full build-out is roughly 16,000 plus gallons per day based on using the Suffolk County Department of Health Services generated flow factor of 0.04 gallons per day for general industrial space and 0.06 gallons per day, I should say per square feet, for non-medical office space. However, there is no breakdown of how many lots were anticipated to generate flow at each rate. No range of potential quantities of generated sanitary flow based upon various uses has been provided. Additionally, as these generated flow rates are determined based on square footage, the range of potential flow rates should account not only for the range of uses, but also for the range of building sizes. It is impossible to determine the potential generated wastewater flow without this information. The DEIS states that all of the proposed lots will be provided with individual low nitrogen sanitary systems that will meet health department standards. No information comparing the efficacy of nitrogen reduction between individual systems and a sewage treatment plant for the whole subdivision has been provided. This information should be required to determine how to most effectively mitigate any potential adverse impacts from generated sanitary flow. No information pertaining to anticipated types of hazardous chemicals or their storage and disposal has been provided. The DEIS states in numerous areas that one of the most common uses on the created lots would be service commercial. This use category includes roofers, painters, pool companies, etc., who often use hazardous chemicals in their trade. Hazardous chemicals can often be poured down drains and end up in a sanitary system or poured onto the ground directly. Potential impacts of such activity should be considered. Our recommendation: the applicant should be asked to provide an analysis of the potential wastewater impacts from the project based on the reasonably anticipated mixture of uses identified. This analysis should include consideration of the sewage treatment plant to serve the entire subdivision and should provide a comparison of the environmental impacts of a community system with those of individual systems based on the potential mixture of uses for the project. Additionally, this analysis should take into account the potential combined impacts of stormwater and wastewater discharges from the project and discuss treatment measures necessary in order to ensure compliance with the applicable water quality and to avoid degradation of Georgia Pond attributable to groundwater discharges from the site. And I do have for you, this is a map of the general area of the Georgia Pond watershed. Potential impacts with regard to traffic. Reference is made to the October 9th comments from the town's traffic consultant for consideration by the planning board, and in particular, the recommendation of coordination dialogue between the applicant, the town, and the Department of Transportation concerning mitigation measures for traffic impacts, and the DOT has been contacted and has responded. The DEIS states that the unsignalized intersections along Montauk Highway will have levels of service that would be deemed failing under both the build and no build conditions. It also notes on this paragraph estimated number of vehicular trips at various peak hours. The trip generation analysis of the traffic impact study uses the land use definition of industrial park to calculate estimated generated vehicular trips. The DEIS states that trip generation rates for industrial park are based on manufacturing, service, and warehouse uses, resulting in 13% of the trips generated by trucks. However, manufacturing and warehouse uses are not typical for East Hampton's economy. The most common use of CI zone lots is for service commercial uses that include such uses as construction, landscaping, pool contractors, all of which generate substantial truck traffic and two waves of traffic in the morning and night, as workers report in the morning and night. The traffic analysis should take this into consideration. Estimated trip generation for this use is based upon the size of a principal building. The traffic impact study assumes that the majority of the lots will have a building coverage of 18.75%. Although, and this relates back to what we said previously, although it is true the maximum allowable building coverage of 50% is unlikely to occur on any of these lots due to generated sanitary flow and parking needs, it is quite common to have buildings which would exceed this percentage. Again, the planning board recently approved something of over 40%. The traffic impact study should be revised to provide a range of estimated generated vehicular trips based upon varying percentage of building coverage so that the range of potential impacts on Montauk Highway and other adjacent highways and intersections can be determined. It should be further noted that two-story buildings are permitted in the CI zoning district. Therefore, building coverage is not the sole determinant of the amount of gross floor area that could be attributed to a use on a particular lot. Each lot would be allowed two separate uses as a matter of right as well. Affordable accessory apartments are allowed by special permit. For all these reasons, estimates for building coverage over 18.75% are warranted and necessary to determine the scope of the potential adverse impact from generated traffic. Our recommendation: the applicant should be asked to respond to the comments provided by the town's traffic consultant, and a coordinated dialogue with the DOT should be initiated concerning mitigation measures from traffic impacts associated with the project. The applicant should also compare the estimated traffic impacts in the DEIS trip generation manual published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers with the impacts associated with the mixture of potential uses identified for full build out of the project, and provide an analysis of any greater or substantially different impacts associated with the mixture of uses. So with regard to other environmental impacts, in particular unavoidable adverse environmental impacts, the DEIS states that irrigation will be minimized by utilization of rain gardens and low-mow fescue with no fertilizer-dependent vegetation. It assumed that this relates to the individual lots. No mechanisms to ensure this, such as a covenant, has been identified. Additionally, rain gardens need to be designed based upon generated stormwater runoff, individual to each lot, making a covenant or other such condition difficult to enforce in the future. For example, will design standards such as square footage, depth, materials, etc., be established, and could they actually be feasible on every lot? That's a question. Although both issues are noted above, in the DEIS, the increases in generated sanitary flow and stormwater runoff are noted as unavoidable adverse environmental impacts. Again, in this section, is stated that both issues will be dealt on a lot-by-lot basis as development happens, and no consideration of comprehensive subdivision improvements such as recharge basins or sewage treatment systems have been offered as alternatives. With regard to energy use, conservation, and climate change, the DEIS states that future development of these subject property will, there's a number of points here, but the key ones, to the extent practicable, utilize reflective roofing for all proposed buildings to reduce heat absorption and conserve energy. And also future building exteriors will be constructed using recycled content and integral insulation for increased energy efficiency. And our recommendation, the applicant should be asked to clarify how this would be enforced and to what extent if it is to be considered as a mitigation element of the subdivision. So we get to the part of the DEIS which looks at alternatives. The proposed subdivision layout includes reserved areas around the periphery of the site. You can see that on your screen right now, as opposed to one block of open space. It has been past practice of the board to require the reserved areas not be broken up into various small pieces, rather to be in one contiguous block. More broadly, the alternative should take into account setback and other restrictions of existing zoning for the site. Pursuant to the adopted final scope, it has been identified that the proposed project may result in the loss of future recreational resources. Among these would be a portion of the South Fork Bikeway, which calls for a bike lane to be established along the northern portions of the property. This plan has been in place since it was adopted into the comprehensive plan. Our recommendation, the proposed subdivision, as well as all the alternatives offered in the DEIS, should include this important potential future recreational and transportation resource by providing the minimum 20-foot wide right-of-way parallel to the Long Island Railroad for the bikeway. The applicant should be asked to provide updated alternative plans that include this resource, important resource, and take into account setbacks and other restrictions in the in existing zoning for the site. So going back, I suppose, to the aerial, I'm zooming out a bit, which will show you that the property is comprised of 6 individual lots. So alternatives are required under SECRA. Alternative 1 is the no action alternative, in other words, not doing the subdivision. The DEIS defines the no action alternative. The no action alternative assumes that the subject property would continue to remain 6 tax map lots and approximately 56 acres of the roughly 70.51 acre site would remain in its existing condition as a predominantly vacant and underutilized as a former sand mine. There would be no new clearing, ground, or site disturbance, no construction, and no other activities on the property in the immediate future under that no action alternative. However, in the case of the subject application, the action as defined under SECRA is the subdivision of the property. The applicant's not undertaking the action, that being the subdivision, does not preclude them from further developing the property's 6 individual tax map lots, provided applicable zoning and other regulations are met. Our recommendation, the DEIS should be revised to identify the development potential of the property as 6 individual tax map parcels. Alternative 2 is the Suffolk Cement relocation alternative, which probably the best way to show that would be just through the proposed subdivision map. And the idea would be, as you can see in the notation, would be taking the, well, actually, alternative 3 might be the best to show you. Yes, that's probably the best.
Eric, you're not screen sharing.
I'm not?
No.
Have I been throughout this entire thing?
Yeah, no, you're sharing.
I am.
I'm not seeing your map. I don't know.
You're still on the stuff, on the proposal where it's divided.
Yes. Yeah, I zoomed in to the southern portion of the property.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can see there's a notation here. It says partial potential relocation of Suffolk Cement, which would be moving from this area here where I'm highlighting with the cursor to back behind the tile company there. So as noted in the DEIS, this alternative is similar to the proposed subdivision. Additionally, there is nothing in the proposed subdivision design that would preclude the relocation of Suffolk Cement onto either a single lot or, if needed, across 2 lots that could be merged. As such, this does not truly represent an alternative subdivision design. The advantages and disadvantages section does not make any mention of the potential impacts to the residential properties to the east associated with relocating Suffolk Cement closer to these lots. A full discussion of the scope of the potential adverse impacts from this alternative, including dust, noise, other issues, should be provided. So the map that you have.
Eric, could you show that on the overhead on the photo, just so that people know what they're looking at?
Sure.
As well. Thanks.
Sure. So the idea behind alternative 2 would be a relocation of activities occurring on this portion of the site over to the east, to that other portion of the site.
And the residential lots that you're talking about
are all along here.
Very good. Thank you.
Eric, do you know the motivation for that relocation? Is that to get it off the highway?
Why don't I just get through this and then we'll get into all the details.
Let's not have questions of substance.
Okay, so alternative 3 is what's called the open space alternative. And with regard to the ecology, they say a disadvantage of the open space alternative is stated that to be that existing pitch pine oak forest will be lost, presumably due to the fact that the reserved area proposed around the periphery of the site under the proposed subdivision layout would no longer exist. However, this assumes that the planning board would not require that these areas be preserved either through the establishment of building envelopes, scenic easements, or other means. The town code directs the board to do just this. And it says natural vegetation, trees and natural vegetation shall be preserved and integrated with the proposed improvements wherever possible. And what I'm getting at here, if you look at the map, you'll remember, and I guess maybe the best thing to do. So you're looking at alternative 3, the open space alternative. This is the proposed subdivision. And you'll see if you look up towards the top of the lots here, they've added a portion of the reserved area as a buffer along these areas this is actually the west, this is flipped 90 degrees, and then also along the south, along the periphery of the site. And to show you what we're talking about with those existing areas of trees. So they put these reserved areas here ostensibly to preserve the few areas of natural vegetation that surround the property. You can see that if I zoom out here. You can see as you look around the periphery of the site, there is a ring of trees there. And they're saying on that first point I was making, they're saying under alternative 3, which you now see in front of you, that that would be lost, because now what they're doing is they're putting their open space in one big block located here. And then there would no longer be this ring of protection through reserved area protecting those trees. We're noting here that you would normally preserve those anyway. That's part of the subdivision process. There doesn't need to be a reserved area there. There could be an easement or something else.
Eric, if I could just interrupt for 1 second, in case anyone's watching and they're not familiar with the property, they should understand that what they're looking at right now has the western boundary on the top of the screen, but when they look at the overhead, it has the northern boundary at the top of the screen. So
yes, it's rotated 90 degrees.
To orient yourself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I can even flip the view if you think that helps.
Well, just in case anyone's not familiar with it, they can compare apples to apples.
Oops, went the wrong way.
Yeah.
Always go the wrong way.
Yeah, now you compare apples to pears.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
So now the north is basically north.
Photograph. Now show the photograph so folks can see what you're talking about. Okay, thank you. Have at it.
Okay. So these, again, I'm kind of repeating myself here a little bit, but these areas contain steep slopes as well, which the board would also require not to be included as buildable area. That's part of the town code. This should not be identified as a disadvantage of the open space alternative. This is also identified as a disadvantage of the Hamlet plan alternative, and should not be. The recommendation is that this alternative and the Hamlet plan alternative should be revised to provide for the retention of the existing pitch pine oak forest that runs around the periphery of the site. The conclusion sections, and this is only with regard to the open space alternative. With regard to the open space alternative, the DEIS states, quote, additionally, it is uncertain if the town would purchase the Suffolk cement parcel. Therefore, this parcel could remain vacant and underutilized if not purchased by the town, end of quote. Although it is true that the parcel could remain vacant and underutilized, it could also be developed like any other industrial lot, and the DEIS should note this fact. Alternative 4 is what's identified as the Hamlet plan alternative. And I will open that for you now, and I will also orient it north-south for the benefit of those watching.
Okay.
So zooming in here, again, flipping back to the aerial photograph, which is north-south, and now going to alternative 4, now north-south. As you can see on this plan, there's a single block of 7 acres of open space. This is the 10% required under subdivision regulations. And then also a 14-acre parcel adjacent to that, which could be acquired by the town. And then potentially Suffolk Cement could also be acquired by the town, is the idea here. So as the name suggests, the Hamlet plan alternative is an attempt to offer an alternative subdivision layout, which is comparable to the development concept described and illustrated in the Hamlet study for Wainscot. This plan, their Hamlet plan alternative, includes a 10% reserved area as required by the code. And as I just mentioned, potential relocation of Suffolk Cement and a 14-acre parcel, both that could be acquired by the town. Although this layout mirrors some of the details of the concept plan provided in the Hamlet study, it is missing numerous key elements. I'm going to now transition to a photo that is taken directly from the Hamlet study, if it ever decides to load here. Usually just takes about 10 seconds on this thing. So it does mirror some of the elements of the concept plan provided in the Hamlet study. I'll give this a couple more seconds, and then if not, I'll switch away. Specifically, it does not, it's missing numerous key elements. Let me get out of this here. Doesn't seem to be loading. I have this. I have another way to get this picture up if it doesn't open. Just because there we go.
Yeah.
Just because this will be very beneficial as a visual. However, their Hamlet study alternative is missing numerous key elements from what you can see in front of you, which is the Hamlet plan sketch. Specifically, there are no areas of mixed-use single-family housing. Although it is noted that the current zoning does not allow for housing, a zone change is a possible remedy for this. Assuming that such a zoning change occurred, an alternative which is more in keeping with the vision of the concept plan included in the Hamlet study for Wainscot should be included and considered in the DEIS. Additionally, although this alternative provides a possible train station as identified in the Hamlet study concept, the station, as you can see here, it's up in the top right-hand corner of the subdivision. The station has been illustrated in the northeast corner of the northeastern corner of the proposed of the property, as opposed to the northwestern corner, which again, flipping back to the Hamlet study drawing, you'll see train station up here on the top right. This should be amended as locating the train station in the northeastern corner, which would place it in close proximity to an area at the intersection of Hedges Lane and Daniels Hole Road, which contains a train trestle and a sharp curve, both of which limit sight distance. And perhaps the aerial will show you that. This area right here, where I have my cursor, there's a sharp bend in Hedges Lane over here. This is Daniels Hole Road, also has a sharp bend heading toward it. And then obviously with the train tracks here, you have a train trestle right there. So having a train station here and having the traffic right in that area could present issues with traffic flow. So the DEIS identifies that under this alternative, a 14-acre parcel which will be set aside for potential, a 14-acre parcel will be set aside for potential purchase by the town. It is stated that, quote, if the town is unable or unwilling to purchase this land, the parcels depicted in these alternatives would remain vacant and underutilized. Although it is true that the parcel could remain vacant and underutilized, it could also be developed like any other lot under existing zoning that allows for mixed and or residential uses, or be sold to a developer and developed under current zoning. The same potential exists for the other lands identified in the Hamlet plan for public use. The DEIS should note this fact and consider the potential advantages and disadvantages of these alternative scenarios. And just in continuation of the idea of the Hamlet plan, this is another concept sketch that is included in the Hamlet plan that focuses on the southern portion of the property. So our recommendation, the applicant should be asked to provide and consider the advantages and disadvantages of an alternative that is consistent with the town's vision of the Hamlet plan, as providing a mixture of commercial, residential, and industrial uses on the site based on an assumption of amended zoning that would allow those uses. The DEIS should take into account alternative scenarios for the potential public versus private development of the lands identified in the Hamlet plan for public purposes. So our, I'm almost there.
No.
Just wetting my whistle. So the planning department's conclusions, the board should consider all the aforementioned items which have been identified by the planning department as elements of the DEIS that make it incomplete at this time. The board should also consider the comments offered by the consulting firms and determine if the elements identified in their reports are also required to be addressed before a public hearing for the DEIS can be scheduled. In numerous sections, the DEIS references that certain issues such as final grades, generated sanitary flow, drainage control, etc., will be addressed on a lot-by-lot basis as each is developed. Under such course of review, it would be impossible for the planning board as lead agency or any other involved agencies to assess the potential for adverse impacts as a result of the proposed subdivision. This fact is reflected in many of the recommended changes and additions to the DEIS outlined in our memorandum. The DEIS needs to be amended in the specific ways outlined above and as outlined by the board's consultants, but the general issue is that a complete and comprehensive review of the proposed project has not been provided at this time. The town code states specifically that a subdivision shall be considered as with an integrated plan. At the time of the initial application, all projected improvements to the site shall be disclosed and considered so that an integrated plan of future improvements is developed. And that is our memorandum. And then I remind you that we also have memorandums regarding traffic from LK McLean Associates PC and regarding hydrogeological issues from FPM Group. And I believe that their representatives are here to discuss them.
Well, that was quite the report and very comprehensive, and we thank you for it. I would, Mr. DiBiase, I hope I didn't maul your name there. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm coming on video in a second. Okay.
There you are. Okay.
That's me.
If you would like to give us your take on your review. You're with LK McLean Associates, and you did the traffic impact analysis of the traffic impact study appendix that's attached to the EIS.
Correct.
Okay.
Since I haven't appeared before the board before, if you like, I can give you about a minute of qualifications. Otherwise, I can skip ahead.
No, go right ahead. That'd be useful for us.
Okay. I've been a traffic engineer for 45 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer and a professional transportation planner. I'm past president of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, Met section of New York and New Jersey. I kind of share your pain in some respects because I'm also, my side job is chairman of the Village of Port Jefferson Planning Board.
Congratulations.
I'm also a continuing education course evaluator for professional engineers for New York State. That's the basic overview of it. I'd like to go through the memo, but first I want to say that in terms of scope items, I think the only item that was omitted from the traffic study, which is pretty comprehensive, as you can see, is an item that Eric already mentioned, which was a discussion of traffic conditions during construction, including truck volumes, truck routing, sizes of trucks, time frame, things of that nature, which is important to assess in terms of construction impacts. That being said, I mean, my memo is 3 pages and Eric had about 13, so you can guess about how long I'm going to be. But I'd like to hit some of the background and some of the comments. Essentially, what I did was I jumped ahead and looked at some of the traffic capacity analyses and things of that nature. I think this will help get a dialogue going with DOT, who has jurisdiction over any improvement on Montauk Highway, and the applicant, and expedite the review process. So maybe just to go over a few things from the memo. Given the size of the development, the various alternatives we talked about already, the assumptions that were made in the alternatives, some of them are important because they lead to the mitigation measures that were identified in the traffic impact study. And there's also some sharing of the mitigation measures with the town and the state. Typically, anything in accordance with SECRA, any mitigation, traffic mitigation as a result of the project, which essentially is the additional traffic that's generated by the project, any impact of that is the responsibility of the applicant. Of course, you need to work together with the governmental agencies in implementing some of the mitigation, and that's the topic of discussions that we'll be having ongoing during this project. I said that we should have a dialogue with DOT established, and Eric's already started that by sending the DEIS to DOT for comment. So just to cover a few things, we talked about the Wainscot Hamlet study, which was prepared by Dotson and Flinker, and we provided transportation recommendations as part of that study, which was finalized in 2018. In that study, roundabouts were proposed at 2 of the intersections in the Hamlet study, and those are on Montauk Highway at Wainscot Northwest Road, and also at the area of the Georgia Drive extension contemplated as part of this project. It's important to note that DOT, as policy, first requires that roundabouts be assessed before traffic signals. Roundabouts are the preferred option. They need to be assessed and addressed, and advantages and disadvantages pointed out. If it's not feasible to construct them, then you go on to traffic signal installation. But that's DOT's official policy and procedure. I'd also like to note that we talked about some of the mitigation that's acceptable in the town way back in the town transportation plan, which was developed in 1997, and of which I was the principal author. In attempt to preserve the rural character of the town, the public mandate we got during the course of that transportation plan was to avoid certain roadway improvements. And that would be addition of travel lanes on existing roads. And when I say travel lanes, not turning lanes at intersections, but travel lanes for through traffic for significant distances. Construction of bypass roads to congested routes, such as Montauk Highway. The installation of traffic signals, and the encouragement of use of existing bypass roads. With the advent of GPS, everyone knows where they are now. So GPS also gives you travel time. So there's extensive use of bypass routes in the town. I'd like to point out just some of the key things in the study that need to be addressed. So this will give the applicant a chance to start looking at them. We note that the traffic counts used in the study were conducted on a summer Thursday, and that 40% of the traffic was estimated to come to the site from both the east and the west, and the remaining 20% from the north. We request that the applicant look at the summer and shoulder seasons, the weekends, and with peak traffic days being Friday and Monday, we need to confirm that that conclusion is accurate, because that's key. What percentage of traffic comes from what direction in looking at the intersections that are affected. We also noted that the ITE, or Institute of Transportation Engineers, trip generation manual was used to estimate new vehicular trips to the site, and that there are 2 editions of the manual. The 9th edition was followed closely by the 10th edition. And the study notes that the rates in the 10th edition for the weekdays were used because they were higher. However, and then that's to be conservative in the analysis, but the Saturday rate in the 10th edition is 25% higher than the 9th. I had that backwards. The 9th edition used weekday peak hour rates because they were higher than the 10th. But conversely, the 10th edition had a significantly higher rate of trip generation on a Saturday, 25% higher than the 9th, and the 9th was used also for Saturday. So the 10th should be used for Saturday. I had some specific comments on the actual intersection capacity analyses. Those are the copies of the printouts that make up most of the pages of the traffic impact study. Generic values of peak hour factor, that's the percentage of traffic that comes in the peak hour, and the percentage of trucks, generic default values were used. So they should be updated to actual conditions, which were most likely determined from traffic counts or from historical traffic count data. There was a conflicting statement about the intersections currently operating along Montauk Highway at level service, unacceptable level of service or failure. Yet there's another place in the study where it notes that the computed levels of service were C and D, which are not failure. So there's a little discrepancy there. Any comparison of level of service, which is the measure of the intersection's operation, and just to digress a little, that's like a report card for an intersection. Level service A and B, if you got a report card in school with an A and a B, you know you're doing very well. C would be somewhat average. D, barely acceptable. F is total failure or breakdown of an intersection with a lot of traffic queues and congestion and extensive queues. E is a level that's in between. That's the actual capacity where the intersection hits the capacity. So level service D is acceptable during peak hours on Long Island. That's tolerable, even though it's barely acceptable and just below capacity. Given the traffic congestion on Long Island, that level is acceptable during peak hours. And any comparison of levels of service, which is the report card, needs to include the average delay per vehicle as a corresponding measure. So you might have a level service F, which is failure, and you might have an average overall intersection delay for each vehicle of, say, 60 seconds. So that's level service F. But you could go as high as 100 seconds. You can go way over. So just to say level service F now, and under the proposed conditions, it's also level service F, not entirely accurate because you need to look at the delay values. I had some specific comments regarding the proposed accesses to the site. And I should note that the study focuses on just the preferred alternative or the desired alternative for the applicant. And it does note that the alternatives, this alternative scenarios that were mentioned generate less traffic. So it looked at what it feels is the worst case in terms of traffic. It didn't specifically provide all the analyses for the other cases.
Would it be useful for the site map to be put up on the screen for this purpose?
Oh, sure, that's good. Yeah, that would help.
Could you do that? Eric?
Yep, I'm working on it right now.
Thanks very much. Didn't mean to take you by surprise, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, just give me 1 second. You can continue, Ray. I'll get it in a second.
Okay. These are just some of the key things that need to be addressed and looked at in more detail in the next version of the traffic impact study.
There you go.
So at the northwest corner of the site, which I get, maybe you want to rotate that again, Eric?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So at the northwest corner of the site, where the access is to Wainscot Northwest Road, the northwest corner, it's noted in the traffic impact study that any trucks exiting the site at that point, so coming out of the site onto Wainscot Northwest Road, would be prohibited from turning left. Now, the prohibition would just be a no left turn sign. So unless there's police enforcement on a regular basis, a lot of times motorists and maybe truck drivers who are making deliveries trying to save time will ignore that. And unless there's a physical barrier preventing them from doing that, they would most likely occasionally try to turn left and head south on Wainscot Northwest Road through a residential area. So you have a conflict between truck traffic and the residential nature of the roadway. And also truckers entering the site from Montauk Highway heading east and want to make a left on Wainscot Northwest Road and go up to that same point and make a right into the site would also be going through a residential roadway. Now, the northeast access, the Daniels Hole Road, which was already discussed by Eric, is proposed to be shifted to the south to improve the sight distance, kind of about where that curve in the road is. The site access would come out the curve south of the railroad. That's significant curve to the right, so that if you came out at that point and looked left and right, you'd be able to see a pretty good distance. It's a lot better than coming out where Hedges Lane comes out just almost underneath the railroad trestle, and you can't see looking to the left because that's a narrow trestle. So your view from the stop line as you look to the left is really cut down significantly. The question I had, and it looks like the report states that that could be accomplished by traversing two properties that the applicant owns. The issue that I see is that it bisects Hedges Lane. And again, you might have a situation where you have trucks exiting the site and making a right down Hedges Lane, or vice versa, coming up and making a left to come into the site. So you have that residential character of the roadway, and I would think that that would be some significant public comments at both of those points on either side of the site. Moving down to the southeast, where there's a proposed, and it's not really shown clearly on this drawing, but there's a separate site plan in the traffic study just for the intersection of Old Montauk Highway, the extension of Georgica Drive, and Montauk Highway. There's 3 roadways in proximity there. Unless we get a view of that, it is in the bottom, well, right where the cursor was on the screen there. But the problem there is that Old Montauk Highway is not very far from Montauk Highway. So anyone pulling out on Old Montauk Highway and trying to turn left to get to Montauk Highway is only going to be about 50 feet or so from Montauk Highway. That's too close. So anyone pulling out of Old Montauk Highway is going to have to compete with the traffic leaving the site, which is in most cases, because it's only 50 feet, you'll see a good storage of vehicles or queue of vehicles waiting there to get onto Montauk Highway. So that will be an issue in terms of some additional congestion that needs to be addressed. And the other one that I pointed out was the conversion of Bathgate Road to a one-way westbound roadway is something that was proposed as part of the mitigation of the project, and that's between Georgica Drive and Wainscot Northwest Road. The problem with that is, or one of the issues with that is, anyone coming down Wainscot Northwest Road who desires to turn into that mixed-use area between Wainscot Northwest Road, Montauk Highway, and Georgica Drive, the existing businesses there. Anyone coming down Wainscot Northwest Road who currently wants to turn in there can make a left onto Bathgate Road and get in. If that roadway is one way, they would have to come down all the way down to Montauk Highway, try to make a left turn there, travel east on Montauk Highway, and make another left turn to get into that area. So that's undesirable. Just a couple of other comments. We said that given the size of the development, Suffolk Transit should be contacted about establishing bus stops within the site so that anyone who works there doesn't have to walk too far to get to their business. I made a couple of comments on traffic accident analysis in the report. And that's essentially it for the highlights on the traffic impact.
Lot to chew over. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Next, we have FPM Group, and I see Mr. Cancini. You're on this call.
Yes, that's correct. I'm going to go over our report here.
Please.
We identified, basically a few areas that we're going to address, and that's water supply needs, wastewater management at the site, as well as soil and groundwater quality at the site. Eric addressed many of the water supply needs that we had mentioned in the report, and that's basically primarily related to the anticipated development of the property. There was limited information on the anticipated commercial industrial uses, and we think it's important that these uses, be further defined so that the water needs can be adequately addressed, and that, the project going forward can know for sure whether Suffolk County water authorities, either existing or, proposed future construction of additional lines would need to meet the needs of the site. So that was pretty much our water supply concerns related to the site. The next section we had in our report was wastewater management needs. We reviewed, relevant sections of the report, and again, the usage of the site going forward is very critical in understanding the wastewater management. needed for this site. We feel a sewage treatment plant should be considered in this evaluation. We understand, that the property is proposed to develop likely in stages, as noted in the DIS. So this can, certainly have an impact on how a sewage treatment plant is done. But sewage treatment plants can be constructed so that they have capacity for additional demand in the future. However, that needs to be known generally up front so that sufficient infrastructure can be planned and land can be allocated for that. Another thing we had noted in reviewing the report was, they showed very basic designs for their on-site sanitary systems. We think they need to provide more detail on that. To meet this on-site water treatment systems that are presently being proposed. And also with the water needs, again, going back with knowing what usages are going to be needed in the future, we'd also need an understanding if any speedies permits would be required for any of these potential uses. Going back also to on-site systems as well as the sewage treatment plants. One thing we noted was that there's a mix of fine sands and also silts up in the north end of the site. This could affect the percolation of any kind of on-site system or sewage treatment plant. We think percolation tests and some additional information on the soils at the site is needed. We also, to help improve the efficiency of any system that's chosen on the site, think that the minimum separation distance between the groundwater table and the sanitary leaching structures should be increased from 2 feet to 4 feet. This would allow for greater improvement in nitrogen discharge from these systems. We also noted in some of the design calculations for the site. We had an engineer at our firm look over the calculations. We noted that the design flow was calculated, and they came up with 528,000 plus gallons per day in the design flow for the DEIS. Our engineer disagrees and references the Suffolk County documents for this and indicates that the flow is actually, the design flow that's allowed is 21,000 gallons per day. This is a significant difference. We do note that the site anticipates about 16,000 gallons per day. So they're still underneath the allowable, but not as a big margin as initially noted in the DEIS. And these calculations should be looked over and corrected. We also noted the hydraulic load factor doesn't seem to be completely representative of the uses proposed for the site. This should be updated as well. There was a sonar mass balance model done to determine nitrogen levels from the project. We noted that many of the parameters that are referenced in the DEIS do not match with the model. These factors should be accurately reflected in the model, and the model should be rerun. And also, another assessment that they should do in regards to sanitary management is that by having all these discharges, it should be evaluated what kind of impacts on groundwater mounding were occurred at the site, as well as any kind of potential deviations in groundwater flow underneath the site and what impacts they may have. That's about it for the sanitary component of our assessment. Next section I'm going to go over is soil and groundwater quality. There have been two investigations conducted by the applicant. The initial investigation included the installation of wells around the sites. They had found that groundwater at the site was basically flowing to the southeast, which is consistent with groundwater flow in that area based on Suffolk County data. They also did some groundwater sampling as well around the site, and they did find that there's PFAS contamination underlying the site. They did further investigations with that and an additional assessment, and they did groundwater sampling locations around the perimeter of the site and some on the interior of the site, and found groundwater that's impacted with PFAS is underlying coming in from the north, and also appears to be coming from an area where there has been a reported fire training exercise being done in the past in the northern portion of the site. DEC came in and did a site characterization at the site as well, in association with other PFAS impacts identified in the area. They did collection of soil samples in this reported former fire training area. Impacts of PFAS were noted in the soils. DEC also did groundwater sampling as well and identified groundwater impacts underneath the site in groundwater, as did the other studies that were done. So I guess in summary, we've identified PFAS impacts at the site, as a potential concern. It's noted in the groundwater. It's noted to be coming from upgrading site and also possibly in the fire training area that was done there previously. This is substantiated by the presence of PFAS chemicals in the soil in that area. The DEC did do many borings in that area. We think additional soil borings are needed to further evaluate that area, so that basically these soils that are there can be further characterized and determine whether or not they're a concern for future development at the site, as well as placement of any kind of leaching infrastructure such as sanitary systems or stormwater systems. We wouldn't want to putting water into an area where there's soil impacts. So we think additional soil sampling should be conducted up in the northern end of the site and should evaluate whether or not additional actions need to be taken in these areas. We know also that recently, this past week, DEC guidance has been issued, which has changed some of our initial descriptions, I guess you could say, in some of our sections here under the site characterization. We plan on submitting an updated document to reflect this. We did, between the time we found out about the new guidance and the time of this meeting, we were not able to address it fully in a memo. So I just wanted to put that out there that, additional comments are coming out. In short, it really doesn't change our outcome of requiring, additional borings out there to look at, potential contamination at the site and how to move forward with that.
I didn't give you an opportunity just to give us a little background information before you launched into your report. So if you'd like to do that so we have that for the record.
Sure. I've been Ben Consemi with FPM Group. I'm a professional geologist. I've got about almost 24 years of experience at FPM. I also co-authored this document with Stephanie Davis. She's a vice president at FPM, professional geologist, as well as a registered geologist. We have lots of background and experience with evaluating contaminated sites, brownfields, state Superfund sites, landfills, and other kinds of environmental sites. And we do, commercial site investigations as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that we have, your biographical information as part of the record. Okay, so with that, I'm now going to turn the floor over to the applicant. Mr. Egan, I'm looking on the screen here for you. I'm sorry. I guess you're with Mr. Tintle. You there?
Good evening.
Somebody's echoing.
Let's take down that volume.
Oh, is representative from Nelson Pope and Voorhees going to be doing the response, if you will, for the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
We're looking to get our control here. Hang on one second.
Yeah, hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Very good. My name is Chick Voorhees, and I'm very happy to be here tonight. Hello, Chairman and members of the board. I know Ray Tobias and Stephanie and Ben. So we do thank you for your reports. And Eric, we thank you for the thorough review. Just by way of background, I'm the primary author of the environmental impact statement, but it was done with a large team. So my credentials, just very briefly, I'm a certified environmental professional. I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have about 30 years of environmental and planning consulting in the private sector and 10 years in government, where I was Director of Environmental Protection for Brookhaven Town. And I'm here with David Egan, as you saw before, as well as Mr. Tintle, our client, my associate Sarah Singer. We've also conferred with Walter Dunn, our traffic consultant, and Nelson and Pope, who've prepared the plans to date, East Coast Geoservices that performed the borings that were mentioned by Ben before, and Alpha Geoscience. So we have a large team that has reviewed the various comments from staff, McLean Associates and FPM Group. So we've met as a team, and we have various approaches to addressing the comments. Our goal is to address all of the comments to gain a complete draft EIS so that we can move forward to the public hearing process. We do understand the comments and feel that it would be very productive rather than endless back and forths to have the opportunity to meet with staff to go over our approaches that deal with the various comments regarding need for the project, the site plan of the overall site, the various uses that could be applied to the site, the coverage and development potential of the site, and the alternatives, as well as the traffic comments and the water supply and water resource comments from FPM. So we look forward to the opportunity to do that. We're not going to go into detail on all of the comments tonight, but we'd like to reserve our right to respond to each of the comments. Certainly I think it would be productive to meet with Eric and whoever from the technical side to go over the various approaches that we wish to take. So that's really all we wanted to present tonight, but we are here together as a team and able to go into more detail at your discretion, but we do have a report in front of us to address to obtain a complete draft EIS. So we thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and are here if there are any questions.
Okay. I suppose, we can go into our board discussion and you'll hear what our immediate comments are. If you can take those into account as you move forward working with the planning department staff. Council, is that okay? Dan, Thomas? You're muted. Dan, you're muted.
Sorry. Unmuted? Can you hear me now?
Unmuted. We can hear you now.
Okay. No, I think that suggestion of having the technical folks meet is a good one. One thing that we had talked about doing following this meeting was perhaps, and maybe it's not needed, and Charles can address that, but we had talked about putting together sort of the checklist and getting that out in the next few days or so, so that everybody had sort of the working framework of the issues that we had. If that's not needed, I think the reports from the consultants and Eric are pretty clear as discussion points. But if you see an advantage of having that, just so that the board itself can be confident that the issues are all going to be addressed, that's a technique for doing that. But I share the view that it is useful certainly for the board to have to allow its consultants and Eric and the planning staff to meet and to go through that list, because many of the items are not so easy to address in a sort of one back and forth. You need, I think it aids the applicant and ultimately the process if there's a chance to talk about some of the reasons why, identifying with, for example, greater clarity, the range of realistic uses on the site in the future, and then using that agreement on those, defining those potential future uses as the means for generating the traffic numbers, generating the water numbers, et cetera. And equally important is the recommendation from FPM for additional, either additional borings or sampling. Let them look at a map and identify, based on the lot layout that is requested by the applicant, what areas haven't been tested that make sense to test. And so, doing that in person, or at least, with the information in front of each other, that's a more productive way to get that defined, because the clearer the understanding of the issues to be further amplified or would be addressed, the shorter the time periods getting the document prepared into the public will result. And that the goal in this whole process is to, reach agreement, and it's an iterative process, but reach agreement so that you can get out to the public.
I appreciate that very much. That's exactly what we were looking for, and I think that's the most productive way. So thank you.
Okay, and then we'll add a layer of things to deal with that come from the planning board right now.
Yeah, all right.
Absolutely.
All right, very well. All right, in that case, Randy, you're on, although you're muted. So,
hi, everybody. Well, really, Eric and Ray, and I'm sorry, I didn't, was it Ben from FPM? Great work, really helpful to the staff and the attorneys. It's really, we couldn't do it without you, obviously. So at this stage, I did want to raise as has already been mentioned, the sort of having Suffolk County Water Authority missing in action here. I think we need to know what the impact on the area they're going to export water from to this site. We need to know that impact. What is the impact of exporting 16,000 gallons a day to, on whatever supply well they intend to use? We need to know what supply well they intend to use, and I'm repeating to a certain extent, or do they intend to install more supply wells? What will be the impact on the sending site to send that amount of water here? And then we also want to look comprehensively at what will be the impact, and Ben got to some of this. What would be the impact of importing 16 plus thousands of gallons per day of probably treated water? I'm going to assume that the Water Authority will treat this water as they normally do to this site, and the mounding and so forth. The other things for me at this point, I would just observe that anyone who lives here knows that we have a situation in Wainscot on Montauk Highway that even now in October is not really functional. I mean, there's a queue east of as much as a quarter to a half a mile in October on a weekday. So I don't know how we introduce additional congestion and traffic flow into an area that's already, the infrastructure is already incapable, in my view, of handling what's there. So that's a question in my mind. I do want to say that to me, the map we have is more of a yield plan. I see it as a yield map where you would try to establish the yield an applicant was entitled to. I don't see it as a design for the site. It's just a grid map that consumes almost the entire site. So I think we need to get past the yield plan here to a layout that makes some kind of sense. And my inclination at this point is that we need to move toward something like alternative 4 in the Hamlet study, where there's some significant amount of open space, probably reduced density in the subdivision. And that's pretty much it. I do want to emphasize that I agree with everybody saying that we need a representative mixture of uses to do our analysis, and I don't think we have that yet. For example, a motion picture theater is allowed in the CI district. That would be a major traffic generator. So I think one of the big challenges now is to come up with a realistic representative mixture of uses that could go in here, and then we can do the traffic and the groundwater impacts. But right now, I don't think we have that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Randy. In view of the fact that the applicant hasn't responded yet and is reserving its right to respond, which we certainly appreciate and understand, and in view of the significant report that the planning department's issued, I think that it might be the best thing now for, and we can go around the table on this, any members of the planning board to just mention quickly things that you want to make sure that they emphasize. I have a feeling that it'll be a lot of the things that we've already heard from the planning department and from our experts. So, I'm glad, frankly, that the applicant wants to work with the planning department staff so that we can move this along in a focused way. But again, I don't want to adjourn tonight without giving the board members an opportunity to at least raise their hand and say, don't forget this and such. So I'm trying to remember. I think last week I started on the left, or 2 weeks ago. Well, no, it wasn't me 2 weeks ago. It was Kathy. But the last time I did this, I think I started on the left. So Sharon, we can start
Yeah.
with you, if that's all right. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think Eric and did a great job with these and the experts. So we know what's, I think they have a good guidance of what's ahead of them. So I just want to make sure that when we're discussing traffic, and I think Randy might have brought this up at one point, and the traffic, but just to make sure that we're not just talking about Route 27, and make sure that they include the neighborhood roads and the other roads that's going to affect, because I think 27 is obviously a huge problem, and that's where we're getting the holdups. But once everyone's going to start driving around this at the same, once 27 backs up. So that's the only thing I think I want to make sure that we didn't quite focus on and gets included.
Thanks very much. Randy, you would have been next, so Kathy, go right ahead.
I don't have much to add, really. I just want to thank the applicant. I thought they did a lot of work on this, and I'm really grateful that they're willing to work with our consultants to, mitigate some of the issues that we have discovered. I can't think of much more that I would add. I just want to reemphasize that this whole project is in the Georgia Capon watershed, and that all the related development, we've talked a lot about the traffic, but the two major issues for this project are the traffic and the water supply as well as discharge. So I have confidence in our consultants. I want to thank Dan Russo in particular and his team, and for their guidance in this, and feel that we're in a good place. I think the applicant is acting in good faith, and I want to thank Mr. Tintle for my tour of the property on Monday. It's pretty amazing. It's a huge piece of property. So I think we've got a lot of good material here to work with, and I look forward to the next submission.
Very good. Thank you, Kathy. Ian, you there? Ian?
I'm here. Yep. Sorry, just unmuting myself. I'll try to be quick too. I just reiterate, my thank you to Eric, the consultants, and the applicant. This is obviously a big project. It's important. I frankly think we'll have to do this again once the applicant can consider all the comments and address them more thoroughly. But I'm encouraged by the process here, and I think the professionalism with which everybody's approaching it. I wholeheartedly endorse our consultants talking with the applicant and the planning department, because I think that more information, more discussion, more back and forth is going to lead to a better ultimate plan here. And so wholeheartedly support that. So when the applicant does respond, they can make sure that they're addressing the substantive issues, and not just the print that might have been in this one report. As far as the key issues, I think that it's traffic and water quality. And just very quickly on that, I think that the DOT has to be involved in the traffic issue, because ultimately it's a state road, Montauk Highway, that would be the main road here. And I just want to make sure that we are bringing everybody into this as early as possible so that we can get all the issues. And there's going to be a lot of issues here, on the table and start to resolve them. As far as water quality goes, obviously the Suffolk County Water Authority is going to be pretty important. And I think that in both cases of water quality and traffic, it's getting more specific about the uses there. And Eric, I think, reiterated that a couple of times, that we do have to, I know we can't know exactly how each of the sites would be used, but we do have to have some sort of realistic mix so that we can make good estimations of the impacts here. And just want to emphasize the importance of that, because I think it underlines both of the issues, or the key issues to me, the traffic and water quality. And I think water quality is a number of different things. Beyond that, one other thing I would say is that I think in terms of determining the uses, I think that the applicants could rely on those Hamlet studies and perhaps go a little bit deeper into the economic needs about this site in particular, whether 50 CI lots are needed, what type of industries would fill those. And I think that starting from the Hamlet study and perhaps doing a little more with the economics of that, they could help themselves come up with a realistic mix of uses here. So yeah, I won't go on any longer. I think that if the applicant reads Eric's memo and our consultant's memos and hopefully talks to them to hash things out a little better, I would look forward to their responses and then discussing with the board a revised DEIS.
Great. Thanks very much, Ian. Lou.
Yeah, I'd also like to start by thanking Eric. That was very helpful, Eric. I don't see how we could do our job without all the work that you put in and put out that very comprehensive memo. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Yeah, I want to be short too. I don't want to go into, I had a lot of notes, a lot of items. A lot of this stuff is reiterating what was said in Eric's memo. Also, some of the things that were said with our consultants, which was also very helpful. I reiterate what some of my colleagues on the board have already said. I also feel that the two big issues are traffic and water. The water is the biggest issue for me. I think, the way this application is at this point, and I think everybody agrees, this is not something that, it's not a criticism that I'm making that's an outlier. Right now, the way it stands, it's glaringly incomplete. There's an absence of a lot of items that we need to have. We need to drill down on more specifically in order for us to make the decision that's expected of us. And again, a lot of this stuff comes back to the water issue as well as traffic, but water more so. We need to know water supply needs, discharges, separation, the chemicals that are going to flow into the groundwater, into Georgia Pond. Nitrogen reduction. So the applicant mentioned that they were going to do individual sanitary units. And as Eric mentioned in his memo, even with that, there's going to be an excess amount of nitrogen that will still flow into Georgia Pond. As far as the traffic is concerned, I know we have to work with the DOT and that's a given. But the way I see it, the DOT is only going to make a decision or help us make a decision on how to deal with what the project eventually looks like and what kind of traffic it's going to have coming out of that property. So with regard to traffic, yes, we have to work with the DOT, but I think before we get to the DOT, I think we have to deal with what we do with this property, what the applicant does with the property. As far as that's concerned, I think we should really start from what was presented in the Hamlet plan. I think that's a much better beginning than the very dense subdivision that the applicant has presented. So that's my opinion on that. And just lastly, I did want to mention that I am concerned with the PFAS contamination that's been found on the property. So I think we need to keep an eye on that as well and make sure that whatever we decide mitigates that problem and doesn't exacerbate any contamination from that. And that's it from me.
All right, thank you very much. And Ed.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks to the applicant for undertaking this massive effort and kind of getting us going in this process. On to the next step. Thanks very much. And Eric, Ray, and Ben, terrific work. You've really helped put some perspective around this. And I'm really encouraged by the spirit of cooperation and kind of the plan to get our consultants and staff directly involved with the applicant. I think that's exactly the kind of dialogue that needs to happen to bring this thing to the next step. So it's terrific news that's what's going to happen next. Like everyone else, water quality and traffic are sort of the principal concerns. We've all, spent a lot of time talking about those concerns. I just want to make an observation, and Ian kind of touched on this a little bit, I think, is that obviously I understand and appreciate and respect the owner's, desire and right to develop the property. And we all know that this is an extremely sensitive location. And I think that there is an opportunity here for everyone to benefit and to do something really good for the town. It's not our place to kind of question anybody's business plan, but, as Eric pointed out, if the DEIS is meant to kind of conclude that 50 CI sites is the right thing for this location, I'm not sure that was proven, and I'm not sure that's the case. I think that, the Hamlet study really, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, is a really valid starting point. I think that there's a need for some of the kinds of uses, mixed use and residential uses that were, kind of pointed out in that study that I think really need to be considered in the way that this is developed. So that's one thing, to really kind of look at uses and see whether 50 individual lots is the right way to go here. I think too, it really is sort of impractical to think about, the idea of going through, depending on everyone to do their own stormwater management, their own wastewater management. It just feels as though there's got to be kind of a more integrated and comprehensive look at this as a holistic thing, right? And look at ways of providing some better, infrastructure for the community. And I think that would be, kind of a huge step forward to really be able to look at it in that more integrated way. So anyway, those are just my general comments, but I'm, kind of happy that this is moving forward, and I'm glad everyone's cooperating. And thanks.
Okay, very good, Ed. Thank you. I'll keep my own comments short, obviously. But again, my congratulations, frankly, to everybody involved on this for the way in which we're moving forward. Staff did a phenomenal job, our consultants likewise, and the applicant especially. They've given us, while there are obviously things that we think need, or the staff anyway has pointed out, says need to be completed. I'm very pleased that you'll be working together to move the process forward. Ordinarily, and counsel, tell me if I go off the rails on this. Ordinarily, after a meeting, I send a letter to the applicant identifying the matters of concern that were raised in the conversation. But I don't think I'm going to do that this time because of the announcement that everybody's going to be the planning department and the applicant are going to work together. So I don't think you need anything from planning board saying, make sure you cover A, B, C. Dan, is that okay, you think?
I think I don't think you need to do it in the same fashion, but I do think that sort of given the iterative nature of some of the reports and the fact that we know that FPM has to give us all sort of a revised.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
Reflect this recent DEC thing. I think it would be useful for you to just assemble that with the new report, and acknowledge that. I assume this is the board's. Everybody embraced it. The board's consensus that the next process step ought to be for the technical staffs to be getting together to review this and to, but their goal is to address the issues that have been identified to date, and then to come back with the board, in effect, their recommendations regarding how this will, the next step for completing the completeness. In other words, they're going to need to sit down and come up with their own work plan, if you will, and you need to bless that. You as a board will need to bless that.
And to get the process going forward from this point.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because it becomes important, as a public record, if you will, that sort of concisely, and Eric, you've done this, dozens of times with the post meeting sort of summary. That would be helpful, I think, for moving forward. One other thing I just want to comment on, in considering the fact that most of the board members have expressed a focus on the Hamlet plan. There is an opportunity, again, depending, it's cooperation between, the applicant and the planning board ultimately, to make certain that the DEIS and ultimately a final EIS, that if parts of the ultimate subdivision plan that the applicant wants to proceed with encompasses trying to address the kind of mixed use issues that the Hamlet plan contemplates, for which a zone change would be required down the road, that you could create the environmental record that would provide the town board in the future to modify the zoning, because you will have examined the environmental effects of as an alternative, but at least in a way that would provide the environmental record for taking that future action. So this is an opportunity, perhaps, an applicant needs to reflect on it. You as a board need to reflect on it. But I see it, one of the values of looking at an EIS as not a burden, but as a tool, is to make sure it includes all of the information necessary for all of the future decisions that would be made. So if there is an interest in doing something more than an industrial CI subdivision, which is what the Hamlet plan contemplated, some sort of mixed use or whatever else it is, you could analyze that pretty well and definitively for purposes of future actions by the town board if they wanted to consider it. So I throw that out there just as a thought piece. Eric, you obviously, I'm springing this on you at the same time, but it does provide an opportunity that may be useful to think about.
All right, well, we're going to have everyone's going to have their work cut out for them. I meant to say before I started talking about process in my, in the letter that I will now be written. I as the applicant knows, I live in Wainscot, probably less than a mile and a half from the site. And when I heard about the possible proposal about taking the traffic off of Georgica Drive and down Bathgate Road, that would let off onto Northwest Road. And that's a pretty bad traffic situation right now, even without anything going on. So, you guys will address that, but just wanted to mention that. Well, I agree with everyone. Water and traffic is the two big deals, but there are a lot of other equally important things. I associate myself with Ed's remarks before about dealing with everything that, piecemeal might not be the best way to go about it. But again, I look forward to staff and I look forward to the applicant working together to come back with something else for us. So,
Sam, can I just say something? Just to clarify something.
Who's Eric? Is that you? Please go
Yes,
ahead.
yeah.
Right.
Just to go back just a bit to what will be written, after this meeting, a post-meeting memo.
Mm-hmm.
So in our memo, we asked the question, should the additions and changes to the DEIS as outlined in our memo, in FPM's memo, and in McLean's memo be should those items be submitted and addressed by the applicants? I gather from this conversation that the answer to those three questions would be yes.
Yeah, well,
I'm just trying to craft this so that we have a record of what the board said here today.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that the answers to the three questions that the planning department.
I'm just checking. I'm trying to be clear.
No, I'm glad.
And then I think another point to make would be, again, as discussed, that the applicants brought up the, rephrasing this however is accurate, but brought up the concept of sitting down and discussing these individual issues with staff. And the planning board agreed that staff would meet with the applicants in order to address these issues, something to that effect. And then I don't know if you want to address the fact that Ben Cansemi from FPM did mention that another memo in regard to updated DEC guidelines is anticipated. A memo from him is coming.
Yeah.
So I think those are the 5 items that you could say that came out as a result of this meeting.
I think that's very good. Thank you, Eric, for focusing on questions, which I was just going to run away from, not run away, but close up without dealing with. So anybody who's going to say no, please say, I'll stop, say no, but I'd be surprised. First, should the additions and changes to the EIS as outlined above be submitted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Should the additions and changes to the EIS outlined by FPM Group be submitted?
Yes.
Yes.
Should the additions and changes to the EIS outlined by L.K. McLean and Associates be submitted?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any additional changes to the EIS that the planning board requires at this time?
Sam, one
open question, but go ahead.
Just one specific point for Ben and FPM. I'm aware that the groundwater, the drinking water standards for nitrogen are a certain level set, but that the nitrogen levels for a healthy ecosystem in Georgia Pond, for example, are lower than that. And I just wanted to see if FBM is going to look at the nitrogen levels in both in terms of drinking water standards and also in terms of ecology in the pond.
That's a good additional issue to raise.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking really at nitrogen issues in regards to the sanitary system and the potential outputs to the groundwater. We did not focus on impacts or potential impacts to Georgia Pond.
But the entire project is in the Georgia Pond watershed, so it seems relevant to me. It's within the 0 to 10 year recharge. I don't know what you call it, district or area. I think that's really important.
Groundwater flow.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And I guess that I don't know that we need to add anything about the update from FPM on the groundwater, on the report that came in from the state. That'll just be part of what they do. So
sure.
Yeah, I think we could just indicate that the consultants, that our consultants will work with the applicant's consultants to mitigate the problems that were identified and also to update any further agency, outside agency information that has come to light, recently.
Yeah, and look, FPM they're going to give it something more. It's going to incorporate that, so that's fine. That's all.
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to add before we adjourn?
Yeah, Sam. Lastly, and this is probably not really new information, but I just want to touch on what Dan was talking about. I hope this DIS and the final EIS is as broad as possible, so that we look at the site and what could happen there. And I think the idea of addressing the Hamlet study and perhaps uses that it's not currently zoned for would be a really positive thing, particularly if it's something the applicant could live with and the town planning department and consultants like. I don't want to be too constricted here by the current zoning if there is indeed an alternative that, you know, meshes somewhat with what the Hamlet study suggests and with what the applicant would want. So just want to encourage the development of that type of conversation. Dan already addressed it, and it's in the report here. But just want to emphasize that, you know, my goal would be to find a solution here that suits the applicant, the neighbors, and of course the town at large. And I think by making it as broad as possible and addressing as many things as possible, we could accomplish that.
Very well. Okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody who's involved in this. You know, it's a big project. It's very important project, and I thank everybody for their very hard work. And it is now, the clock on the wall says 8:25. So, if anyone wants to volunteer to do the honors of making a motion.
Motion to close.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
In favor of adjourning, please say so.
Aye.
Hearing no
Thank you.
opposition. Thank you again.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
We're
everybody.
meeting next week, right?
Thank you.
Next week.
Yes, we are.
Next week.
Okay.